But my beats, they are hard.
Sports Wrap, Brian Fulford here, and joined as always. I can't say it's been a while since I've had my backcourt running mate, and we've been able to do the show together. AD Drew, AD man, it's good to see you. It's good to actually be doing a show with you, my brother. How you feeling?
I don't know if we want to call this summer layoff, quarantine, or you just rehabbing from an injury, or me rehabbing from an injury, because that's kind of what it seems like. You know, we teammates, we running mates, and we've both been doing a little solo for the last month after the last conference dropped this bombshell that they wasn't playing. It's like, oh, you pulled a hamstring on that one, so now you got to go rehab.
Right. I feel like there's even a part of an element here where it's like the debut of our. Let's see. This will be the start of our fourth season or third season. Third. Yeah.
Yes.
We might as well call this the first episode of our third season together doing the BCSN Sports Wrap. So we'll tag this season. Volume 3. Volume 3 begins today, and what better way? You know, we're obviously in a pandemic, but there has been sports is back, especially on the professional level. College sports is kind of coming back. There's some anticipation.
They got their toe in the water, but they're scared to dive in the deep end.
The toe, the leg. I think they're sitting on the edge of the pool right now with both feet in the water in some conferences, and some conferences just got out the pool entirely. And went back and changed clothes. And
exactly.
So
that water was too cold.
Yeah, too cold. So the one beautiful thing is, though, we understood, you know, the HBCUs all canceled their fall plans, but, you know, the SWAC was one of the first conferences to actually put out a plan and say, this is going to be our plan for the spring. First conference to do that. Now, we've seen, and AD, you called it. What did you say about what might potentially happen after the SWAC did this?
The SWAC will get no credit when a P5 or FBS school, a FBS conference follows the SWAC model as far as the spring goes. I called it. You have not seen, except for those 2 days that you saw it on the Big Boy Network when they talked about the SWAC, you have not heard an other mention. Yes, I said it. I said it like that on purpose. An other mention about the SWAC.
Right. Yeah. I've stopped looking for, you know, it is anyway. I stopped looking to the big networks to give us anything. But what we did have is you had the Big Ten Conference. And I think it was Coach Jeff Brom of Purdue kind of put out there after the Big Ten suspended their season in the fall. He kind of dropped what was it? He dropped the schedule, which kind of looked real familiar to the SWAC plan. But anyway, the news and the reason why we're here on this episode of the BCSN Sports Wrap is because the SWAC took it to the next step, and they released a schedule of conference games for the spring of 2021 beginning on February 27th. And so that's the purpose of this show. And we even got a special guest that we're going to bring in for this episode to talk about the SWAC schedule. None other than Mo Carter. And we're going to bring Mo in now. Mo Carter, the sports director for WZDX in Huntsville, Alabama. You can find Mo on Twitter at Mo Carter WZDX, and there you can see Mo probably fresh off of doing a live remote earlier this evening. Do I have that correct, Mo?
Absolutely, sir. You know, we're still in the work from home scenario from our company, which is Tegna. So we have half the staff working in the station, half the staff working from home. So yeah, just definitely finished up my early evening show. As soon as I wrap things up with you guys, I'll work on that late evening show, and then we'll get everything rolling. But I do return to the studio on Friday with the start of high school football, which I'm actually pretty excited about here in the state of Alabama.
Look at that. See, Alabama, one of those states that have both feet. They're on the edge of the pool, AD, both feet are in. They're ready to jump in.
Alabama high school football is swimming in the deep end. They just don't. Matter of fact, they may be doing a belly flop in. They don't even think they did a perfect swan dive or anything. They don't get a 10 on this dive.
Now, look, I will tell you this, though, guys. I mean, you know, even though football is returning, there are a lot of protocols that are, you know, being put into place. And the thing is that the state athletic department is working closely with the state medical departments, and they're basically putting a lot of pressure on the local districts, and the districts are creating up their rules and regulations on how the things go and whatnot. For instance, Milton Frank Stadium, which is a public high school stadium here, we actually spoke to the athletic director for the district today, and he basically said that, you know, of course, it'll be less than half capacity for it to be full, first and foremost, and they're actually marking off so many bleachers for people to either sit or not sit in or whatever, just to social distance. Of course, you have to wear a mask and, you know, temperature checks. Another interesting thing I found is that, like, visiting teams have to create travel squads to come whenever they come to play football games. So instead of, you know, bringing your whole 80, 90-man roster, you're probably bringing 45, 55 guys tops or whatever, because they have to come dress, and locker room situations, those are being worked out between the districts. So I'll say this, they put a lot of work into this. Let's, you know, just pray and take this day by day to see how this all plays out.
That's interesting. I'm down here in Florida where we're just sort of getting back and getting ready to open up high school football, and I haven't heard any kind of protocols like that talked about. So you guys in Alabama, AD, you used to live in Alabama, and you're in Georgia now. So yeah, you guys are well ahead.
And speaking of the state of Georgia, you know, we pushed everything back to Labor Day weekend here in the state of Georgia.
Okay.
But the not everything but football, as far as fall sports, has been allowed to begin. And what I have seen at the couple events that I have been to is people had that mask on when they walk in, purchase their ticket and everything and that. But when they get to those bleachers, social distancing is off, mask are off also. So I'm just being in. They got the mask on to get in, to pay whatever the admission fee is to get into that particular event. You know, we play softball in the fall in Georgia, volleyball. Haven't seen cross country meet yet, but I know I'll be catching some of those real soon. But once they get in to the playing area, it's pretty much back to normal. And I don't know if it's because we are creatures of habit, people are creatures of habit, or they don't care. I'm not going to be the one to judge that, but just give you a little forecast of what's happening here in the state of Georgia right now.
Gotcha. Another thing I can tell you too, AD, is that, of course, yeah, if you're a fan, you have to wear a mask basically majority of the time. You have to social distance. And another thing with the Alabama High School Athletic Association that they're moving away from like paper tickets or whatever. So like they're really encouraging people to do electronic ticketing systems, you know, through your phone. A lot of schools have already co-opted with like several online ticketing things, and those tickets are going sale early in the week to where, okay, once you hit that max, they're not basically doing any walk-up ticket sales. And if they do, it's like almost like last minute, hey, you know, aunties from out of town coming or something like that. So it'll be like special case.
So you mean I can no longer, if I'm coming to a game in Alabama, I'll no longer get my ticket with the free coffee promotion on the back of it? Is that what you're telling me? Good
Yes,
God.
sir. That's exactly what I'm telling you. So
unbelievable.
Look, you know, you better pull
That's an
out your
outrage.
smartphone and get whatever that app is and be like, dude, purchase ticket, and then show it at the gate. They scan it, you're good to go.
Hey, one other thing, Bo. Are they doing concessions in Alabama? I know Georgia had temporarily suspended concessions, which if you think about a 3-hour football game on a Friday night, plus you're probably gonna get there 30 minutes early. You know, that's a long time not to have concessions, number one, and then number two, that's a lot of money out the athletic budget that's gone out the window because of those lack of concessions.
I'm glad you actually asked that. We spoke with the Huntsville City Schools athletic director, Scott Stapler, this morning about that. And he said that the only concessions that will be sold are going to be prepackaged things. So, of course, that'll be
chips and candy.
Yeah, chips, candy, bottled drinks, and chips, candy, bottled drinks. And that's really about it, because he said no popcorn and no hot food.
So my man who's got the food cart with the ribs and everything, he's gonna be outside of the high school or in the parking lot selling rib sandwiches.
Well, in Huntsville, we don't do the carts. We do the food trucks.
Okay,
So
right.
That could be that person could be parked off somewhere else in the parking lot, you know, and selling either before the game, halftime, or after the game. So yeah, that's a definite hot spot.
I just want to see who's gonna bring the hibachi in and start just cooking on the sideline just for on GP's sake.
I'm not exactly sure who wants to get that fine.
All right, so if you haven't seen in Mo's background there, you see the Southern University jersey there. Of course, Mo, a proud graduate of Southern University, former, do I have it right, defensive back? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Former defensive back with the Southern Jaguars. What were those years again, Mo, if you don't mind sharing that way? You know, people want to go look up your highlight films and stuff.
They ain't gonna find too much. They may find a special teams play here or there. But 2006, 7, and 8, I was on the yard with the Jaguars.
Okay, nice. Okay, and so of course, as the sports director there in Huntsville, Alabama, right there in Alabama A&M's backyard. So plenty of SWAC connections, and that's why we wanted Mo in to kind of react with us as we talk about this week. You know, the SWAC dropped their schedule on Monday, and so we're going to get in depth about that. But we're recording this in the middle of the week, and so earlier today, you know, to when we're recording this, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference unveiled a scheduling model of how fall sports could be played in the spring semester. They say depending on the status of COVID pandemic and the NCAA guidelines for fall championships, of course, all the NCAA fall championships for FCS have been postponed or canceled, moved to the spring.
Correct.
So the MEAC did not go as in depth as the SWAC, but they gave us a little teaser here. Gave you a little something to kind of wet the palate. And I'm just going to read from the press release, and then AD brought up an interesting point regarding this. So this is coming from Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick, president of Howard University and the chair of the MEAC presidents and chancellors. He said, although it's too early to tell if the coronavirus conditions will improve fast enough to allow us to reconvene spring sports, we want to be prepared with a plan of action. And so next spring, football teams will play a slate of 6 regional conference games with teams split into 2 divisions. The season will span from February 27th through April 24th with a championship game for May 1st. Volleyball season in the spring will potentially span from the first weekend of January through February, with the MEAC volleyball championships being held in March. But 2 big things out of that statement, AD. One, football is going to 2 divisions, which, my God, if they maybe had done that, let's just say years ago, who knows? 2 or 3 schools might not have left. And then
how about
first,
4 schools, Brian?
Oh, I'm sorry, 4.
Maybe 5.
Yeah, and then the first ever MEAC championship game in the 50 years of playing MEAC football. But what was it you brought up and you came about when you heard that news, AD?
Well, first of all, before I go into that point, And I just thought about it as you were reading what you read. Volleyball will start the first weekend in January, run through February, with the championships being held the weekend of March 13th and 14th, with the championship game played on Sunday, March 14th. And Mo can attest to this. Based on the normal calendar, that week in March is usually basketball tournament time.
Yep.
The basketball tournament, correct me if I'm wrong, it has been in Norfolk for the last couple of years, if I do remember correctly.
Yeah.
So are they playing both basketball and volleyball, same city, same venue? Question number one.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Question number one. Question number two. If volleyball is going to begin the first week of January, that means these kids will be on campus in December through Christmas break to start training for volleyball, which I thought was part of the reason that we were avoiding and moving these schedules around. Obviously, the basketball players, if they're going to be potentially beginning the basketball season during that time, would have to be there also during that time. Just something I wanted to throw out there before I get into the point that I brought up. Any one of you guys want to comment on that?
Well, I'll say this, especially that March date that you're talking about, if you're specifically looking at that second weekend of March, that's usually the tournament, the conference tournament, not just for the MEAC, but for several Division I programs. And I think once we actually get into the SWAC schedule, I'll be able to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. So it just makes you wonder, like, what's their strategic plan and thinking on the possibility of putting basketball and volleyball at the same place? That's a good question to think about. Or, is that a situation where maybe you play one in the morning and one in the evening over like a 2-3 day span? I mean, is that something, I guess they just wanted to put it out there and then they'll address it at a later point in time. That's what I would go ahead and say. But, once again, I'm not one of those decision makers. I'm just one of the individuals that receives the information, puts it out there on the TV screen for people.
Oh, yeah. As somebody who has converted gyms many a days and many a times from volleyball to basketball and back and forth, it would be logistically tough to play college basketball and college volleyball for a game in the same venue on the same day and remain on any type of significant schedule.
Well, but AD, I would argue in the week, in the middle of the week, yes, but on the weekend, you play that volleyball game in the morning by noon. You got plenty of time to break down the volleyball court, get the basketball court set up by the late afternoon for the evening. I think you could do it.
Except for one thing, Brian. Volleyball is like baseball. There is no clock. So you may get allowed 2 hours for that volleyball match, and I've seen some 3.5 hour, 5-set.
That's why you start. That's why you start them at 10 o'clock. That's why you start them at 10 o'clock in the morning.
28, 26, etc., etc.
Start them at 10 o'clock in the morning. They'll be done by 1, probably.
But like I said, I'm just throwing it out for discussion.
Right. Go to the let's go to the football divisions here, AD, and then you brought up that interesting point. So the division breakdown, North and a South for the MEAC. The Northern Division will consist of Coppin State, Delaware State, Howard, Maryland Eastern Shore, Morgan State, and Norfolk State. Now, of course, only Delaware State, Howard, Morgan, and Norfolk play football. Okay. The Southern Division will, of course, consist of Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M, North Carolina A&T, North Carolina Central, and South Carolina State. I mean, that's absolutely brutal. I don't care what sport, but that is absolutely a brutal division to play in. All 5 of those schools, just, my God, brutal.
I think all 5 of those schools have won the MEAC over the last decade.
Yes, definitely. And will probably be favorites. If not 4 of those 5 will be favorites, all 5 might be favorites. What was the interesting point that you brought up earlier when we were talking, AD, about this potential schedule that the MEAC might put out in front of us?
Okay, I'm gonna start off with this sentence. Next spring, football teams will play a slate of 6 regional conference games with teams split into divisions. Now, do you take those 6 regional games to be division games only? If so, based upon the 4 schools in the North that play football, Delaware State, Howard, Morgan State, Norfolk State. You got 4 teams, 3 opponents. Your 6 games could be a double round robin, a home and home with each other. Meaning in the South, in the brutal South, everybody plays each other once. There would be 2 teams who would have to play each other twice. Going back to what you just said, Brian, imagine if you are a FAMU and you draw A&T twice on your schedule.
Oh God!
Imagine if you're Bethune and you draw Central twice on your schedule, because if you just stay strictly in the South, that South is going to be brutal. The North can take care of itself. You really could play a double round robin in the North and make your 6 games up. Add a 7th game, non-conference, which we'll get into when we talk about the SWAC and other stuff. But that's the point that I had brought up pre-show, Brian.
Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about that. Mo, what's your thought on that, the MEAC's announcement and just the proposal of what they're stating there with the slate of 6 regional conference games and the 2 divisions?
Well, for MEAC fans, first of all, I will say this. I'm sure they're just happy to hear that there's some sort of plan, because I think for a long time, MEAC fans are just wondering, like, what the heck are we going to do all the way until 2021, especially if it's the fall or whatever, before we're actually playing football. So I think they're excited or whatever from being that. At least if I was in that standpoint, I would. Now, when I just look at the whole brutality of what the South Division looks like, it's just one of those things where, like, you really, really can't split it up. I mean, look, not taking away nothing from any of the teams in the North that play football, but Delaware State, Howard, Morgan State, Norfolk State, I mean, yeah, granted, they're kind of always been middle of the pack. So at the same time, they're going to be fighting it out or whatever. But that South Division, golly, the 2 Florida schools, A&T, Central and South Carolina State. I'm looking at this right now. I'm more of an old school wrestling fan, and one of my favorite matches of all time was at WW at the time, F's Armageddon 2000, when they had the Hell in a Cell match that featured Rock, Rikishi, Triple H, The Undertaker, Kurt Angle, and of course, and Mick Foley was the one that put that together. And of course, he said that he expect careers to possibly be made or possibly ended. And of course, that was probably one of the best showcases I ever remember being somebody in high school watching that. So that's what I think about this whole South Division, because each week you literally have to bring your big boy pants to play in this in this thing. And of course, North Carolina A&T will probably be the favorite just because, of course, they've been represented in the Celebration Bowl. But if you're Florida A&M or if you're Bethune-Cookman, you got a lot to play for, because this is the last time you are playing football in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. Same thing for North Carolina A&T. This is the last time you play in the MEAC before you head over to the Big South to play the likes of Kennesaw State and Campbell. And then, of course, for Central and South Carolina State, they're trying to send those teams out, with losses and not be the champions and whatnot. So I'm interested to see how the actual scheduling will be. I mean, granted, if you got 5 in the South and you're trying to play 6 games, that means 4 divisions, and then I guess you turn around and play another team in the division, or maybe you play in the North. I don't know exactly what that is. I mean, the SWAC's motto is the 4 division and then 2 cross-divisional opponents. But of course, right now, it just looks like the MEAC just left everybody with hope, but didn't really put together a great idea what it is. And I hope they eventually will come back to it and let everybody know, hey, here's what we got going on. But I know the next thing they're going to have to do is just put together the schedule to kind of figure some things out with that. But I do like the idea of them actually putting together a football championship. They've been rolling strong for 50 years now. So why not put it together for an exciting time? Because the future is kind of, you got to shrug your shoulder on what the conference is going to look like totally with, a lot of departures coming up. But a pretty good opportunity to put together a conference championship would be good. And depending on TV situations, you'll probably get it on TV too. So that's always a solid thing because you bring financial benefits to the conference for that.
Yeah. You know what I as I'm thinking here, all 5 of those teams in the South, now they're sort of outnumbered overall, but in terms of talking about football, it's 5-4. If I'm all five of those schools, I get together and say there's no way we're going to allow the teams in the North to play home and home, and then you just randomly somebody's going to get screwed in the South of having to play somebody twice. I mean, you know, imagine if Bethune somehow gets stuck having to play A&T and South Carolina State twice. You know, I mean, there's no wins. Those are 5 teams that'll probably have good seasons or are planning on having good seasons. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you're going to do it that way, okay, I get it. I understand. But I would not be surprised if those 5 schools and those athletic directors get together and say, whoa, let's talk about this whole schedule thing, because the North has the advantages, and in the South, we're just going to beat each other up, and whoever comes out of it, like you just mentioned, somebody's career is going to get ruined.
All right, I got one for you, Brian.
Yeah.
And Mo. Okay. Watch this. If they have a spring homecoming, I guarantee you the South, if they cross divisions, if South plays North once or twice, nobody in the South will play anybody else in the South for homecoming.
Oh, no.
No.
I mean, here's the thing. Why would you do that when you got when you got 3 teams leaving the conference or whatever? Think about it. There's a possibility, like, okay, I want to make sure I'm looking at this right. Okay, if you're Morgan State, for instance, okay, Morgan State, you will probably not see the likes of Bethune-Cookman or Florida A&M on a non-conference standpoint for several years, most likely. So why not go out and schedule them, especially for the alumni bases of those opposing teams? Yeah. Of course, those 2 teams I just talked about, they have great fan bases that travel, and of course they have large alumni bases in various areas that I don't have enough time to point out here and there, but y'all exactly know what I'm talking about. So yeah, why wouldn't you do? I mean, there's a possibility you take that L, but at the same time, you take the W at the gate for the amount of tickets you're probably going to sell for those.
Exactly, and I'm looking at these. If you just stay in the South, just the regional matchups of these, all of these are money games in the South Division, and in the North, those are money games between each other. Howard and Morgan, that's a good money game for them, with them only being less than an hour apart. Norfolk, all those schools are within a 4-hour drive of each other. Those are money games for those northern teams. These southern teams, we already know FAMU and Bethune is a money game. FAMU A&T is a money game.
All those games are money games. However you match them up, they're all money games.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't care which one of those teams in the South, that it's going to do it good. Central and South Carolina State, Bethune, that's a money game. So this is actually a good revenue model for the MEAC. They should have came up with this 5 years ago.
Let me add this one last point here on the MEAC. Although they have not, put any specifics, their schedule is very similar to the SWAC. And as we get into talking about the SWAC schedule, is AD, AD very eager to talk about that. The SWAC schedule starts February 27th, same as when the MEAC would start. Mm-hmm. It ends April 24th, same as what the MEAC released. And the SWAC's championship game is set for May 1st. Oh, guess who else is having a championship game on May 1st? The MEAC. So a lot of synergy there, not by accident. And as we get into talking about the SWAC schedule, I think what the SWAC did is they opened the door for the MEAC not only to put this out and do this, but they also showed them and say, okay, look, we're going to lead you. Here's going to be some open dates where we can possibly do some cross matches. We'll talk about that here in a few moments. Mm-hmm. One other news note that I wanted to bring up. We thought that when the OVC canceled their fall sports, that Tennessee State was the last HBCU to sort of be standing in terms of playing football in the fall. Well, that's not the case, as Florida Memorial University, in their inaugural season of returning football to their campus. For those who aren't familiar, Florida Memorial University, founded in 1869, I believe, is a historically black college and university in Miami Gardens, Florida, which happens to be the city where the Miami Dolphins Stadium is. I think it's called like Hard Rock something or other. But the Dolphins, that stadium sits in Miami Gardens. So in that city, community north of Miami, I think it's in Fort Lauderdale even, or, somewhere in that area. That's where Florida Memorial is. They are actually planning to go forward with a football season. They are NAIA level 2. They play in the Sun Conference, which I think the Sun Conference, or it's either the Sun, it's the Mid-American Conference. There's like 20 teams in that conference or something. But anyway,
Sun Division. It's the Sun Division of that conference.
Thank you. Okay, the Sun Division of the help me out, AD. The Mid-South? Is it the Mid-South?
You're asking too many questions right now.
I know. I got ahead of myself. Anyway.
Post-editing.
Yeah, post-editing. The key point is Florida Memorial will be the only, right now, as of mid-August, things could change, the only HBCU planning to play. And they have a schedule which is 8 schools. And I think some of them they're playing twice. And also, we can say this because I wrote the press release on this. The Black College Sports Network has entered into an agreement with Florida Memorial University to broadcast and stream online a lot of their athletic events. So if there is football played by Florida Memorial, if things stay as they are, we will actually be broadcasting those games. So, a lot of people will kind of scoff at the idea of, oh, you guys are playing football. But look, can you imagine you make plans for 2020? You made plans 2-3 years ago to make 2020 your debut season, and then all of a sudden a pandemic hits. Talk about bad luck. But fortunately, we do things different down here in Florida, if you didn't know, Mo and AD. There is going to be football for Florida Memorial University and the Black College Sports Network. We are excited and proud to be a part of it. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's get into this schedule. That's what we got Mo here for. We got a lot. We're going to break down this 8-week regular season schedule, and we're going to treat this like it's fall, man. I saw this thing, and I don't know about y'all. I stayed up late. I stayed up to I don't know how long working on this, on just going through these notes. It's like Christmas in the fall, and these games don't even play until the spring. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will get into this SWAC schedule for the spring of 2021. You're watching and listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap on the Black College Sports Network.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network. Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford and AD Drew here. Joining us, Mo Carter, Sports Director, WZDX in Huntsville, Alabama, Southern University grad, former Jaguar football player, and we are here to break down the SWAC schedule, which was released earlier this week. Real quick, social media plugs. Follow Mo on Twitter at Mo Carter WZDX. Always a great follow. Some great stories in Huntsville, of course, right there where Alabama A&M is. Real excited about the Bulldogs. We'll get into talking about them in a second. A.D. Drew, of course, you can find him on Twitter at BCSN Drew. And, of course, you can find me at DRB365, Black College Sports Network, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at MyBCSN, the number 1. All right, gentlemen, let's go. Let's just first reaction, Mo, A.D., do I have you there? You still there? Okay. Mo, I go to you first reaction. Mo, schedule comes out. What's your initial thought? What are you combing through? What are you looking at when it first comes out?
Personally, for me, of course, I had to go from the work standpoint. So first thing I'm thinking about is, okay, who is Alabama A&M playing first? And second thing I was thinking about was, when will the spring Magic City Classic be played? And that was the first thing I started skimming through or whatever. After that, I'm like, let me pop this on the website, and then let me work on finding a way to get in contact with Coach Connell Maynor. Luckily, Sports Information Director at Alabama A&M, Justin Graves, was already on that. So he already had a setup to talk with Coach Maynor, who was on the golf course. Something he's doing a lot during the pandemic. But hey, I totally understand what he's doing like that, because he's told me multiple times when he's not spending time with family and he's not doing football, he's on a golf course. So totally understand that. So yeah, those were the first couple of things I looked at from a personal standpoint. I was like, okay, so who does Southern play first, and then when will the Bayou Classic be for the spring? And found it interesting that the Magic City Classic and Bayou Classic are basically now on the same day. So those were my initial reactions. And after that, I just kind of started looking at week to week, like, okay, who has an advantage here, who has a top heavy schedule, who has a bottom heavy schedule, and who just has a gauntlet. Those were things that I started kind of looking at here and there. And of course, what I just mentioned, you have teams like that. Some teams are top heavy, some teams are bottom heavy, some teams are just like week in, week out. Good God, they got to just, find a way to show up. But the other cool thing I liked was you see those first 2 weeks, and then you see the bye week. And I was like, okay, well, they give them some time off. But then I looked at the date and realized Dr. Charles McCullum doesn't want football being played on the same weekend possibly as the SWAC basketball tournament either. So very, very smart man. I always say, hey, I like Dr. McCullum because he's a businessman and he understands the business of athletics, finances, and various other things. So I do like that standpoint. And then after that, man, it's just a matter of, it looks like, week to week, a lot of teams have favorable schedules that are either going to show what they're worth, or they're actually going to make the fans at least be happy, not only to play football, but, the way the actual schedules roll out, and you have quality opponents.
A.D., what about you? First things that sort of come into your mind as the schedule comes out.
I kind of did what Mo did. I looked at the classics first. When were the classics going to be played? Starting off with the State Fair Classic, Prairie View and Grambling. Then the following week, you got Texas Southern and Prairie View. It's the Labor Day Classic, but
I was going to say, what do you call that thing now? The Houston Classic? I don't know. The Houston Classic?
When is Mardi Gras next year? I haven't looked at the calendar that far, but it's almost more like a Mardi Gras Classic than a Labor Day Classic.
You're right.
Yeah, or Lent Classic, or whatever you want to call it.
Probably gonna be called like the Spring Classic or something like that.
Yeah. And then like me living in Alabama for all the years that I did, I wanted to see when Magic City was, when was the Bayou, and I know we just heard Mo say this, but why are they on the same weekend? Why could they get pushed up a week? I think that would have been great to see the Bayou, the Magic City maybe in the week of April 10th instead of the week of April 17th. But let's take a look at that last week. Magic City Classic, Alabama State, Alabama A&M, Jackson State, Alcorn. That somewhere in there is going to be the Eastern Championship between those two games. Let's go to the other side. Of course, you've got the Bayou Classic, and Arkansas Pine Bluff, as Bryan noted off camera, has a lot of All-Americans on their team. Prairie View, Arkansas Pine Bluff, that last week is going to be an interesting matchup.
A lot of offense in that game, Drew. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So
the way the schedule comes at the end, if if everything goes to chalk, as they say, you're going to have 4 of the 5 games potentially determining who's going to the SWAC championship game. What better way to end the season?
Right. Okay. So the way this schedule lays out, and I'm sure most people have seen it, but just for the purposes, as Mo pointed out, it's essentially a 10-week schedule. Week 3, which essentially is the week of Saturday, March 13th. The men and women's basketball tournament is set to play March 9th through the 13th. So that essentially is an entire conference bye. As Mo brought out, Dr. McClellan, the SWAC really did a great job of saying, hey, we want our fans to not have to be conflicted between football and traveling to, this the MEAC, the SWAC basketball tournament, men and women's tournament. So it gives the opportunity to fan base to go. It gives football teams sort of a week off. Everybody is on a bye, no non-conference games. Then everybody picks back up in week 4. And then the interesting part between week 5, 6, and 7, you've got all 10 schools with a opportunity. It's either going to be it's a non-conference opportunity. Right now it sits as an empty spot on the schedule. Obviously, we'll get into talking about in just a moment what possibly might happen. You got opportunity to play non-conference schools, all kinds of possibilities.
Yes, sir.
Then you get into the final week of the season, week 8, which I think is a great week, and we'll talk about that. And I think that is purely for television. I think that is a television gold mine. And if you can find a way to schedule all 3 games throughout the course of the day, one at noon, one in the mid-afternoon, one in the evening, I'm talking jackpot gold, SWAC football all day on April 17th. Then
Can I hold it right there? I need to ask more
well,
questions.
hold on. I want to go week by week. So hold on any thought that you got for the last week, because I know you got a lot of thoughts there. Then April 24th is on the schedule. It sits as open. The SWAC championship game is May 1. And it leaves a couple of interesting notes. Is that an open date in preparation of the SWAC? Potentially, we don't know the date of when the FCS playoffs will start. Could that open date be sitting there as an opportunity for, let's say, if the SWAC wants to move their championship game up a week so that somebody has an opportunity to play in the playoffs? I think, that is all there for open interpretation, but it just sits there as open right now, and we don't really know. Obviously we won't know for a few months until later on that. What were you going to add in real quick, AD, before we kind of get into week 1 here?
I was going to ask Mo, has he heard anything about the Magic City Classic? Will it still be a neutral site game in Birmingham? I know it may be early in the conversation, but with you being there in Huntsville, maybe you've got some news and notes. Is it still going to be a neutral site game or possibly on the campus this year?
Well, we did get confirmation from the Magic City Classic and the individuals who run it along with the city of Birmingham, and they have all plans set in place to play that game in Birmingham. Now, of course, there's a lot that's going to happen between now and mid-April, so, we'll just have to see what capacity looks like. We'll have to see if there'll be tailgating allowed, and we'll have to see if, they'll even put together half a capacity within Legion Field or not. Reason why I bring that up is because here in the state of Alabama, the SEC just put their statements out about stadium capacity. Both Auburn and Alabama's stadiums will be working at 20% capacity at a max. So for Bryant-Denny up in Tuscaloosa, that's a max of only 20,000 people within their stadium. For Jordan Hare Stadium down there on the plains of Auburn, that's about 18,000. So give or take, like I said, Legion Field can hold about 80. They've seen high 60s, close to 70s in the last 5 to 10 years. So that'll be interesting to see, where the city of Birmingham kind of lays front with it. But the big thing that I want to mention about Alabama and Auburn or whatever in this situation, no tailgating within the SEC this year. And if anybody knows how big the Magic City Classic is, the tailgating is just as big as the game and the pageantry of everything that goes on with the MCC. So that's going to be something that a lot of people will be looking into when it comes to that. But as of now, to answer your question, AD, basically right now Birmingham does plan to host the Magic City Classic. Same with the city of New Orleans. They say they have plans for the Bayou Classic, but of course we're going to see what happens with that, because I saw like the other day, the New Orleans Saints, first couple of home games, they have nobody in the Superdome.
Right. Follow up on that, Bo. When will the new stadium be ready in Birmingham? Because I know they've been talking about moving the Magic City Classic potentially to the new downtown stadium where UAB is going to be playing at.
The new stadium in Birmingham, which right now I cannot remember what the name of it is because they changed it like twice in the last 2 years or something, that will be ready fall 2021. UAB will be playing their games at that stadium, and actually the AHSA Super 7 football championships will be in a 3-year rotation now with that stadium, Jordan-Hare Stadium, and also Bryant Denny.
Yes.
All right, so let's do this, guys. As we go week by week here, kind of, I mean, you know, instead of, I could break down each game, but we'll just kind of go from each of us and kind of say, what's the one game that you think is most interesting that you're looking at? I will start with week one. First off, the guys who did the scheduling for week one's outstanding job. Great bookends. Week 1, week 8, great job scheduling. Dr. McClellan or whoever did the scheduling, great job. The game that I'm all eyes on is Alcorn State at Alabama A&M. I mean, you've got Felix Harper versus Quill Glass. The 1 and 2 and probably in the SWAC offensive player of the year. Obviously, Harper won it last year. In my opinion, Glass got completely overlooked by a lot of people, but Harper did have this great year. I think the preseason favorite should be Glass, but it's Harper who's getting all the preseason love.
Right.
Last year, that game was won by Alcorn State last year. Alabama A&M actually had a chance. They had the ball on the Alcorn State 14-yard line with 4 seconds remaining. But, Mo, you can probably break that game down and how that game ended. But there were combined 1,000 yards in that game. No Jordan Bentley this year who went nuts. I mean, you talk about going ham. I mean, Jordan Bentley was a beast in that game last year. But I just think the fact that you start the season with your 2 spotlight quarterbacks, that's it for me. Give me that game to start. I'll go to you, Mo, because I bet you probably have that game circled as well.
Absolutely, man. I've got that game circled as well. Going back to last year's matchup, as we mentioned, Alabama A&M was in the red zone against Alcorn State. Akil Glass trying to buy a lot of time on that last play of the game. He eventually found a wide-open wide receiver in the back of the end zone for what seemed to be a game-winning touchdown to basically not only win the game but to win the Eastern Division title. But unfortunately, he was penalized for illegal touching because he stepped out of bounds and didn't reestablish himself / became the first player to actually touch the ball because he did not establish himself, and thus because of that, lost it down. Alcorn State gets the victory and wins their 6th straight Eastern Division title. And I guarantee you, Coach Connell Maynor, Akil Glass, and all those other Alabama A&M Bulldogs will remember what happened in that game. So the fact that they get Alcorn State on the hill on the first day, they know how big it is. Actually, I talked to Coach Maynor earlier in the week, and when I asked him about that, he said that, well, we know for sure they're going to have to come here, and he's actually glad that they are going to be playing because at the same time, whoever gets a victory in that, they're going to have a leg up in the Eastern Division one way or the other. I mean, whether Alcorn wins it or if Alabama A&M wins it, you got to look at whoever the loser is, man, they're going to be kind of trying to get back in the fold, and they're going to need that team to lose 2 games because even if let's say they both lost 1, whoever won that game, the matchup is going to have the tiebreaker. So, yeah, that game is definitely going to be huge. And I think, like I said, I think for sure that contest is definitely a huge game for the East. Bryan, before we go a little bit further, I also want to say this. I love the fact that how they're doing the spring football, primarily because you get a chance to really liven the campuses, not only with football games, but if you do it right, it could be a circle of a whole lot of other things within the actual university itself, especially if you want to add sports. I give you a perfect example. The semester I graduated, spring 2009, of course, I had already finished up my football eligibility, but I remember that day they had the spring football game at Mumford Stadium. That game was about at 2 o'clock. Earlier that morning, Coach Roger Cato and the baseball team, they were playing either Jackson State or Grambling. I can't remember which one it was, but whoever it was, of course, it was a big rival, and of course, it was the day where they wear the throwback Negro League jerseys. So that game was in the morning at about 10 or 11. So you finished that game, people rolled over to the spring football game. Also, it was the day where you had high school day for the juniors and seniors coming on campus. And then after the football game, we had our Spring Fest, which is basically like homecoming in the spring for the university. And of course, big crawfish boil, you can get all you can eat or whatever. And then there's a huge concert afterward. And I remember that year, R&B sensation Ryan Leslie and then Young Jeezy were our artists that day. And of course, that was a huge day, just to be a undergrad and enjoy a whole day of sports and entertainment. So I think in those first 2 weeks, you could have situations where you could do your basketball games really, really early, maybe do like 12-2 or do 11-1:30, and then do your football game 3, 4, 5 o'clock or whatever. And I think you will have an exciting campus. I mean, I don't know what tailgate is going to look like, if that's going to be allowed, but if it's not, that still gives you an opportunity to still hit this game, and hit this game if it's strategically planned right on the schedule wise.
Yeah, AD. That sounds like some weekends we had at FAMU, doesn't it? Sounds like I don't know who did it first, but it sounds like some days, But anyway, I hear you. AD, what's your game from week 1?
Prairie View Grammar, and I'm going to tell you,
State Fair Classic.
State Fair Classic. Besides the fact that it's the Classic. We remember the start that Grambling got off to last year. They did not get off to a good start.
They want to run fives out of them, man.
But they finished so strong. I want to see if Grambling can start the season off strong this year. Because like Bo just said, you cannot afford to go down early with only 6 conference games.
Correct.
Every game is important. So I really want to see if Grambling can get off and that momentum that they had at the end of the season, carry it forward to start the season off.
And I'll mention this because Prairie View A&M lost Jalen Morton and DeWanya Tucker, right? 2 explosive offensive players who, we loved watching the last 2 years, right? Morton got drafted by the Green Bay he signed as an undrafted free agent with the Packers, right? Hopefully Tucker will get an opportunity once we get through COVID because, man, that guy can play. But here's this. I don't know if you pay attention to Phil Steele. His all SWAC conference selections, Prairie View A&M was tied with UAPB for the most players on his 3 teams, first, second, and third team with 13 players. And Prairie View had the most players on the first and second team. So, whatever we think about Prairie View A&M, or we think that, hey, they lost your quarterback and running back, I'm telling you, there's a squad coming back with Prairie View, and depending upon who takes over as the quarterback and the running back, that Prairie View is going to be an interesting squad to pay attention to out of the Western Division. One quick note that I found as I was going through, or actually 2 quick notes. Southern and Alabama State, those teams have not played since 2016. Kind of an interesting scheduling thing that goes on for a few games. Those teams, and previously those teams had met 14 consecutive years. Of course, Southern has won the last 4 in that series. In 2016, Southern beat Alabama State 64-6. Mo, I bet you remember that.
Yeah, I remember watching on ESPN3. I was like, good Lord, what's going on here?
It was probably over at halftime, right? Right after the
Huntsville, but of course I was still paying attention to what was going on with the team I used to cover in Montgomery. I was like, oh Lord.
And another thing on week 1, I did not know this. This might be a fun little trivia thing you can throw at some people. Mississippi Valley State at Jackson State. Jackson State has won 24 of the last 25 games, including the last 5. The last time Mississippi Valley State beat Jackson State was actually in 2014 at Jackson State, 27-23. Jerry Rice's nephew.
First year with Valley, if I'm not
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Yeah. Jerry Rice's nephew catches the game-winning touchdown for Mississippi Valley State, but 24 of 25. Yikes.
Well, here's something interesting about that, Brian, and I know a little bit more because I go to church with several individuals who live here who are actually Mississippi Valley grads, including somebody who used to play under Coach Willie Totten when he was the head coach. Even though that record between Jackson State and Mississippi Valley is very, very lopsided in favor of Jackson State, you look at some of the majority of the results, those games are about as close as they could be. It just so happened,
right.
Everything just fell in Jackson State's favor and Jackson State's manner in most cases. So I know a lot of people kind of overlook the Jackson State-Mississippi Valley rivalry, but it's a legit rivalry. It's just really lopsided on the wins and losses, but it's pretty close. Heck, that game went into overtime last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it did. Yeah, 31-28 in overtime.
Had a chance to win in regulation at that.
Yeah, Valley had a 21-0 lead in the second quarter, so they kind of blew that one, and Jackson State kind of ran off 4 unanswered. All right, Mo, I go to AD. You get week 2. I'll give you week 2. What's your top game for week number 2?
Not intriguing matchups, but I'm going to go a little bit off the radar with this one. And this one's going to be close to Mo's heart. I want to see UAPB and Southern. UAPB, and I don't know why I'm just drawing a blank. The only real offensive player that they lost was the running back. Help me out with the name, Brian.
Taylor Porter.
Yeah, Taylor Porter is the really the only key player that's not returning off of that offense. That pretty doggone last year. We all know what Southern brings on defense. So I think that's going to be an intriguing matchup. UA in week 2.
AD, I'll give you another reason why that game will also be pretty big. Southern quarterback Ladarius Skelton is from Arkansas, from Little Rock area, if I'm not mistaken. So he always embraces the opportunity to play the HBCU Division I squad from Arkansas in Pine Bluff. Of course, he had a very big game against them last year. So, and he always definitely looks forward to that. But no, I can definitely agree with you on that one being a huge game. Another one I'll go ahead and point out. I'll point out the Alabama State Alcorn State game, primarily because let's just kind of just put this in perspective. Let's say Alabama State and Alcorn State both lose their week 1 matchups. All of a sudden, they're looking up or whatever at people in their, in the SWAC in general. So even though, of course, divisions count more than what cross division does, you still will have a number in your loss compared to your win. So basically, I feel like that game is definitely going to be huge. And remember, the last time Alabama State went to the reservation, they upset, the Alcorn State Braves. So I guarantee Alcorn's still definitely thinking about that. But on the flip side, down there in the Gump, Coach Donahue Ely, love the guy, great guy, whatever, did a lot of work with him when I was working in Montgomery, but I know for sure, like at this point, he wants to take his team to the next level. So from week 1 to week 2, you basically get the 2 teams that played for the SWAC championship the last 2 years, and it's kind of put up or shut up for the Hornets in those first 2 weeks. So that's why I would say that Alabama State, Alcorn State game is going to be huge, especially if certain things happen in week 1.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Mo. That's my game. That was 28-25, 5 overtimes. Mm-hmm. Is that game in 2018, and that actually happens to be the last time that Alcorn State lost a home game. They have something like a 22-game home winning streak, which is now, I think, one of the top 2 home winning streaks in the nation. Division I football, FBF, FCS.
I mean, it's an easy place to play for sure.
Yeah, so that's the last time that they lost. It'll be Alcorn's first home game of the year. And so, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like you said, it depending upon how week 1 goes, it could be tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so
oh, Brian, before you go to the
yeah.
don't forget about that Jackson State Grambling State game either.
Oh yeah. You're right. I hate the fact that I looked over that.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, from week 1, I mean, you're looking at from week 1 and week 2, Jackson State's got 2 of his biggest rivals. They've got Prairie View that first week, and then they've got Jackson State the next week. So they'll also be in a situation where it's kind of like you got to bring your A game from week 1 to week 2. I'll also say this: a lot of money will be made from Grambling State in these first 2 weeks when it comes to when it comes to playing PV and then Jackson State. Of course, Grambling gets them at Eddie Robinson Stadium, so that'll definitely be an advantage. But at the same time, of course, those 2 teams always, go at it. 2 big rivals. Of course, all you got to do is hop on I-20 and you're getting from one place to the other. So I can see the fan bases rolling from east to west or west to east, depending on which side you're going at that. So, yeah, that's definitely another one we probably want to consider. Put a little asterisk next to it.
Yeah. I'll admit, I probably looked past that because Grambling has won the last 5 and 8 of the last 9.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, as I look overall at schedules, Grambling and Alabama State, I think, have 2 of the toughest 6-game schedule or 6-game conference schedules among anybody. And I'd throw probably Alabama A&M right in there after them. But if you just look at whoever you think are favorites, when you look at Alabama State and Grambling, they play 5 of the 6 probably quote-unquote favorites. It's like there's no days off, no games off.
Yeah, I'm looking at Alabama State schedule right now. Good
Brutal. Alabama State schedule from the jump. First 4 games, it's like, whoa. Yeah, so, and then, of course, the other game in week 2 is at Prairie View A&M at Texas Southern. We'll call that, as AD said, we'll call that the spring fling. Maybe some kind of name they better come up with. Mardi Gras might still be going on, so maybe they can tie in.
Well, actually, I just looked it up. Mardi Gras is actually in February this year.
Oh, okay. Well, there goes that. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so week 3 is the bye week. Then
all about basketball that week.
Yeah, all about basketball. Everybody comes back in week 4. We've only got it's a full slate of games in week 4. All 5 games. Mo, what's your top game for week 4?
In week 4, let's see.
March 20th.
Yeah, it's a lot of good ones. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and just go with the one I know for sure I'll be paying attention to the most, and that's Alabama A&M going to Prairie View out there. Alabama A&M and Prairie View have not played each other for a couple of years, kind of because of the SWAC scheduling model that they had previous to what they currently have now. I want to say it's been like since 2016.
Yeah, 2016. Yep.
That we last saw Prairie View actually take on Alabama A&M. So yeah, that's definitely going to be an intriguing matchup. Of course, Prairie View, a lot of offensive firepower. Their head coach Eric Dooley, very great guy. He was actually the wide receivers coach when I played at Southern University. Great man, but I'll tell you, great coach, but even a better man. And he always knows how to get his guys ready for some great matchups or whatever. And I'll say this: Alabama A&M definitely needs to have their head right going into that contest. And, hey, we could see some fireworks in that one. I mean, we know what Akil Glass can definitely do. And offensively, yes, Jordan Bentley is not there, but they did bring in a lot of running backs to try to replace it. But we know the passing game is going to be solid with Xavier Moore returning, Adu Fatai Ibrahim, the SWAC Freshman of the Year. And then remember, Brian Jenkins Jr. will be back 100% from his injury as well. So they have the potential of having 3 wide receivers that can get well over 500 receiving yards within the season. So that's definitely something that you want to take a look at. Yeah, so it could be a long day for the defensive coordinators for both teams in that one. So, yeah, I would definitely look at the A&M Prairie View game coming off of that. And remember, everybody's coming off a bye too. So, who knows? You could be really, really refreshed and ready to, go into that next standstill.
Yeah, for sure. All right, AD, I'll jump it over to you. What's your game that you're looking at?
Jackson State, Alabama State at Horner Stadium in Montgomery. That game is always a good game. It's always, traditionally a good crowd at the game, and I'll say traditionally because we don't know what the crowds are going to look like. You know, Jackson and Montgomery about 4 hours apart or so. Through the woods of Alabama before you get to I-20. I've made that ride. That's why I know that.
Oh, I know exactly what that ride looks like.
You got to ride through Selma and then get on. Then you catch 20 once as soon as you cross into Mississippi.
Yeah, go to Demopolis and those other areas too.
Exactly. But I think
Pettis Bridge.
There you go. But I think that's a good game. Those two teams have always been good. You know, that really used to be a good matchup when Rick Comegy was at Jackson State, and he always used to come back to Montgomery, and
right.
I always used to seem to have Alabama State's number. You know, he had Alabama State's number from his days at Tuskegee and his days at Jackson State. So that's when I first got intrigued with that matchup, watching Coach Comegy come back, and I still think that's a interesting matchup. And hey, looking at these schedules from what Jackson State has and Alabama State has, this is going to be a must-win for Alabama State in week 3.
Well, again, 3 straight Alabama State, man. Look, Southern, Alcorn, Jackson State. Hello, thank you, schedulers. That's all Alabama State is saying right now. Thank you, schedulers. You know, people. You know, Coach Hill-Ely, man, God bless him, because that's got to be stressful. If I'm looking at that, you know, people. You know, I'm not even gonna say fan bases get crazy with schedules, and you don't come out on the right side of the win-loss margin. That's all I'm gonna say. That's a tough schedule.
That's why you play the game.
Yes, sir. That's why you play them. All right. So you guys took my other 2 games. So I'm looking clearly at UAPB at Grambling that week. Grambling won that game 39-33 last year. They've won the last 6 games. I mentioned earlier, UAPB is coming back. They've got, 9 guys on field steals, first and second team, all SWAC. 13, which is the most, tied with Prairie View for the most in the conference. They're coming back. Now UAPB lost their coach, who went on to I think he accepted a job in the FCS level, if I'm not mistaken. So
it if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you may be right on that. So what UAPB's offense will look like, but the talent is there. And Grambling, so, we talked about Grambling's tough schedule. I mean, Prairie View A&M, Jackson State, UAPB, that's the first 3. Hell, Grambling in week 4, they play Alabama A&M, or their 4th game. So, I mean, those first 4 are tough as nails for Grambling. I think that's going to be a great game. And that's my game. That's my spotlight game in week 4. The other games that we didn't mention, you've got Southern at Texas Southern, and then you have I believe that is Mississippi Valley State and Alcorn State that week. So there's a Mississippi rivalry game that weekend. That game will be at Mississippi Valley State. Okay, week 5, March 27th. Now we get into 2 teams have a bye, or at least right now they have they don't have a SWAC game scheduled. So I won't call it a bye. Let's just say there's an opening in their schedule. That's Mississippi Valley State and Texas Southern. Okay. But I think week 5 is interesting because if you look at the 4 remaining matchups, it's an East versus West showdown. Another great job by the schedulers. Right there in the middle of the week, give us an East versus West. And, with all due respect to Mississippi Valley State and Texas Southern, I mean, these are the 4 teams that you got to say all eyes will be on them to see who comes out. Look, guys, there's 4 games here. I'm curious to see what you guys come up with. I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I'm calling out my SWAC championship preview is in this, and I'm saying it's Grambling at Alabama A&M. I'm saying that is my SWAC championship preview game. Grambling at Alabama A&M.
All right.
Grambling won that contest last year, 23-10. Total shocker to me. Given what Alabama A&M was doing all season, that game, Grambling's defense just locked everything down. And the fact that they held Alabama A&M to 10 points, you go look at what even in losses, Alabama A&M was still putting up almost 28 plus a game. And it was really the rushing. I think in that last game, Grambling rushed for 230 net yards in that game. A&M only rushed for 48. Even with Jordan Bentley, who was healthy that game, held that team to 48 net yards. Glass probably didn't have a great night, sacked 4 times, had a fumble recovery, which turned into a Grambling touchdown, threw an interception. That was probably his worst game of the year, wouldn't you say, Mo?
It definitely was, especially that sack right there. It was a strip sack that led to a touchdown. Alabama A&M was actually driving to potentially tie the game, and maybe depending on whatever the part of the game it was, might have went for 2 to try to take the lead. So Coach, I do remember Coach Manor talking about that was probably one of the worst performances they had all year, and he said he put it on himself as far as play calling. Grambling did, pin their ears back defensively, but also at the same time, Grambling was in a situation in that game in 2019 where they needed a win for momentum. I mean, if I remember correctly, I don't think that game counted in the SWAC standings, but at the same time for A&M, Coach Maynard had said, look, we got to find a way to beat the Gramblings, the Southerns, and the Alcorns. And for Grambling, it was more like, hey, we need to find a way to boost ourselves with some momentum to try to go through the rest of the season. Of course, we saw how that kind of propelled Grambling through the rest of their season, eventually getting the upset win over Alcorn State, and then for Alabama A&M, they learned from the mistakes or whatever from it, and you kind of saw more of a balanced attack through the rest of the year compared to seeing Glass put up like 50 passing attempts through that. So, potential SWAC championship matchup. I could see it, but I also see another game that has been a SWAC championship
and game. That's the one I was gonna go with.
Yeah, that's what you're gonna go with. I think Mo might have been going with that one too, but either one, I'll coin toss it. Who wants that one, AD or Mo? Who wants to talk about that Alcorn Southern matchup, which is staring everyone's Alcorn? Is that Southern this year?
I'll let the alumnus go on that one.
All right. Okay, for the Alcorn State Southern matchup, basically it boils down to this. Coach Dawson Odoms, he's had a lot of success against a lot of teams within the SWAC. Unfortunately, the only team has not had a lot of success against is Alcorn State. And unfortunately, Alcorn has definitely had its number, whether it's been during the regular season or it's been in the SWAC championship game, as we've seen the last 2 years. It's not like the game plans have not worked. It's not like the execution hasn't worked. It's just the fact that when crunch time comes, Alcorn just takes it to another level. So I know good and well that my alma mater down there in Baton Rouge is definitely going to be licking her chops for that game against Alcorn State. And of course, hey, fan base too, Jaguar Nation, they want to see Southern beat those Braves from the reservation. I know a lot of alums who are fans, they don't like hearing that tomahawk chop in the late 4th quarter or whatever. So for Southern to actually not allow that, they've got to find a way to definitely to jump on that from an early standpoint. But here's the other thing too, it also provides the confidence boost as well. I think the victories over Southern through the years have helped Alcorn know what they're going up against, and then when Southern tries to come back and give them their best shot in the SWAC championship game, they're already ready for it and they're able to take things up to the next level. Now, of course, offensively, we could be looking at a shootout once again. If Ladarius Skelton, gets to doing a lot of good run pass option things, that could create fit for Alcorn State's defense. But at the same time, Felix Harper, we've seen him do a lot with his arms. We've also seen him do a lot with his legs as well. Of course, that guy is just he's surrounded by so much talent. And then it all comes from the original Eric McNair, and that's Fred McNair, his head coach. So at the end of the day, it's going to be all about the X's and O's and also depending on where both of these teams are at, yeah, you could be looking at a SWAC championship preview, or you could be looking at a situation where it could happen with tiebreakers, depending on if you get to the point where, okay, you got all these ties and then you need to go cross division from that. But remember, these two teams are only separated by about 70-something miles as well, straight up U.S. Highway 61, too. So depending on the status of the fans, you could have as far as a capacity packed A.W. Mumford Stadium or whatever they're going to be able to get from it. But at the same time, too, man, I'm saying, like, Southern definitely needs to find a way to get a victory in that one to kind of propel moving forward.
This is why I love having Mo for this segment, AD. He knows all the highways and the interstate roads. I feel like I'm writing things down like, okay, if I'm in this way, where do I want to go? What's my best route to these games? I love, but you travel these roads and have traveled them. So I just love that extra that you're adding into these games. Awesome stuff, Mo.
Here's another thing, Brian. If you're leaving Baton Rouge and going to Alcorn, of course, always make sure you have, full tank of gas and do if you get to Natchez, make sure you have a full tank of gas and get some whatever, because of course there's really not much of anything between Natchez, Fayette, and then the reservation as well. But a lot of people already know that, but just want to kind of give you that just in case Black College Sports Network gets a chance to do the Southern Alcorn game on the reservation as well, or vice versa.
See, that's first class. That's first class. That's pro tip right there. Hashtag pro tip right there. That is awesome stuff. I put that one in the bank.
From Mo, Google Maps, Carter.
Yeah. All right, AD. So we've gone through 2 of the 4 matchups. So I'm gonna leave you got 2 left. Which of the 2 are you looking at?
Well, if you look at last year's matchup and the way that it ended last year, the Prairie View Jackson State game, which went into double overtime last year, would be an interesting matchup from that week. The only thing I hate about the double overtime game, it was so anticlimactic, ending on a field goal. I mean, let's be real. In overtime, double overtime, you want to see somebody score a touchdown,
right?
Or you with the new rule, when after the 3rd overtime or the 5th on whatever it is, where you just have to line up and go for 2.
And that game last year was on a Thursday night too. Yes. So I mean, a lot of people probably missed it, or you didn't watch it. I mean, it was a weird.
It was on to you, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a weird night. It turned into a great game. I think DeWanya Tucker went nuts. I think he had a couple of great highlights in that game, but I forgot what else. There may have been a good NFL game going on Thursday night. For whatever reason, I just remember that game kind of got lost in the shuffle for some reason.
I can't remember what the NFL game was, but I do know it was on our channel. Of course, we're a Fox affiliate, so I was waiting for that, for that game to end. I think I got back from shooting like a high school game. My show was completely done, and I just remember like kind of seeing the little updates here and there from some other people tweeting. So I probably switched it on like late 3rd quarter, early 4th, and yeah, I was like really, really zoomed into that game to where I think by the time it ended, we were actually getting ready to go on. I'm like, man, like that was a pretty great college game right then and there. And I cannot remember. There was a play that like was on top 10 for Sports Center that night too.
Yeah, there was. It might have been his 80-yard run. I know he had an 80-yard touchdown run. DeWanya Tucker.
Yes, he did. He had an 80-yard touchdown run. He had total 159 yards in that particular game.
Yeah, definitely. And so then
as a matter of fact, Brian, he had 3 rushing touchdowns in that particular game.
Wow. Yes, yeah. Jackson State definitely is glad they don't have to deal with him anymore. The other East-West matchup that week, Alabama State at UAPB. Again, another little quirky thing about the scheduling. The last time these teams met were 2016 in Montgomery. Alabama State won that game 41-21. So I think so far, we've talked about either 3 or 4 games that have not happened in over 4 years, 3 or 4 years. So it's kind of interesting to see how the scheduling matrix of the SWAC seems to be coming around now and picking back up on some of these games.
Yeah.
All right.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1. Moving into week number 6, the interesting week of the schedule in which 6 teams have open dates currently. The only SWAC conference games this week are Grambling at Texas Southern and UAPB at Mississippi Valley State. But in terms of having an open spot in their schedule right now, you've got Alabama A&M, Alabama State, Alcorn State, Jackson State, Prairie View, and Southern. And so, of course, that leads to possibilities of what might be. And I know, AD, you got some interesting theories on what these schools should be looking to do here on April 3rd, week number 6.
Actually, I went through all 10 schools, looked at their open dates, and looked at some potential matchups. Some of these I'm being a fan. Some of these are just being realistic on some games that could possibly play on these open dates. Let's start with Alabama State. Southern and Alabama State do not play. If you want to play a division non-conference game but stay within the conference, Alabama A&M and Southern would be a great matchup for that open date.
That was a good game last year, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mo? Alabama A&M and Southern went down to the end again.
Yes, sir. Last 2 years has been a game that has gone down to the end.
Yeah, keep it going down my list. Alabama State. Mo already know this. Alabama State has 2 rivals: Alabama A&M and Tuskegee.
Right.
So go pay Tuskegee, fill up the stadium as much as you can fill it up, and take another butt whipping from Tuskegee.
So you're saying pay Tuskegee for one game?
Pay Tuskegee to get that butt whipping.
You know what? I guarantee you they would probably be on board with that. And the new mayor down there, Stephen Reed, I'm pretty sure he would probably approve of that too. Just make it happen.
But I mean, what else do you want to see? Tuskegee, Alabama State, Alabama A&M. That if you're a Hornet, that's all you want to see. Those 2 matchups right there.
That is true. It's unfortunate that the 3 years I was down there in Montgomery, I never got a chance to actually see that matchup.
Or experience that loss, because I'm a Tuskegee alum, so I got to throw that in there. Moving on, looking at it. Another SWAC non-conference game that could happen based on the open dates and the teams not playing. Alcorn and Prairie View in a non-conference conference game.
Battle of the purple and gold.
There you go. All right, now, this matchup, since we do not have a SWAC MEAC challenge on the books, could become a potential SWAC MEAC challenge if ESPN wants to pick it up, would be a FAMU and Grambling State. But that would be on the following week, April the 10th. Just throwing some things out there since the MEAC and SWAC have similar schedules. Hopefully the MEAC will need some open dates on there. And I hope the commissioners for both these conferences you ain't got to pay me for my ideas. Just give me one line in the press release. That's all I'm asking for these ideas.
Drew, I thought you were going to mention the fact that FAMU and Jackson State in that open week for Jackson State, given the fact that they had sort of agreed to play at the beginning of this year.
But I got something better for Jackson State.
Okay, you got something better. All right.
Which goes back, I don't remember if we had this conversation on camera or off camera, but remember we talked about the Ohio Valley and whether they will allow spring football. If the Ohio Valley allows spring football, yes, FAMU Jackson State would be good, but Jackson State, Tennessee State is better. if you can play that one in the spring.
Okay.
Right. Okay. AD, can I throw another one at you for Jackson State then?
Go ahead.
I've seen a whole lot of people complaining on some of these Facebook boards that are Southern University related. What about Southern Jackson State?
Ooh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
hey.
I want to get your comments, and then I'm gonna throw something back at you because there was actually something that came about from that.
That would be.
You didn't have that one written. You had that one written down, did you, AD? He got you on that one.
Oh, he got me on that one. I didn't even look at that one. See, that's why he's the paid professional, and we're the amateur podcasters.
Oh no, man.
Now I'm gonna go off the radar with this next one.
Wait, well, hold on. Before you even go with that, so I see you kind of left you speechless. Well, look, on Twitter, Jackson State actually said something about, "Don't worry, Southern. Even though we don't see y'all in the regular season, we love to host y'all in the SWAC football championship on May the 1st."
Oh, wow.
And then somebody from Southern's athletic department responded and basically said that that'll be fine, but you got the location wrong. It'll be at A.W. Mumford Stadium.
Nice. Nice. There we go. That's see what happens. All these great kind of things come out of a schedule release, and I mean we've got 6 months, 6 months. 6 months of smack talking. See, it feels like we're just rewound the calendar here. All right, AD, what else we got?
I got two of these next 5 are gonna be off a little bit off the radar, but I would love to see Mississippi Valley State and Delta State play for that open date. Regional matchup.
Well, hold on. AD, Mississippi Valley State has UAPB that week.
No, I'm just going where the open date is. Which
and they're open. Okay, in week 5. Okay, my bad.
Going back to March 27th, which is their open date. But I would love to see Mississippi Valley State and Delta State play. A lot of these kids grew up playing high school ball together. Cleveland, Mississippi, Itabena, Mississippi, not that far apart, relatively speaking. Mm-hmm. Be an interesting matchup to see those two play each other. And even though Delta State is a Division II team, based on history, you would almost have to put your money on Delta State based on what Mississippi Valley State has done. It would be almost like a Tuskegee, Alabama State matchup.
Yeah, Delta State has been a very, very strong program. As a matter of fact, a few years I've been up here in Huntsville when University of North Alabama was in D2, they had some great battles against Delta State.
All right. Hey, hold on, AD. Hold on, AD. Your mic. Check your mic here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, there you go.
I realized I hit the mute button.
Oh, you good?
Yeah. All right. What else we got?
Prairie View, Alcorn. I think I already said that one.
Yep.
All right, we already said Southern Alabama A&M. Here's another potential MEAC SWAC challenge game. UAPB, North Carolina A&T.
That would be in the next week. UAPB.
That would be the next week.
Yeah.
Last open date game, like I say, you have to kind of look at the schedule, see where these open dates are. Mm-hmm. I am going to go way off the radar on this one.
What you got?
Texas Southern, Tarleton State in Texas. Transitioning to FCS. Correct. They are an FCS independent. I'm going to tell you why I throw Tarleton State into the conversation. Everybody is wondering if and when Tennessee State will move into the SWAC. In order for Tennessee State to move into the SWAC, you're going to need a 14th team. Tarleton State fits the footprint of the SWAC. They're not an HBCU, but outside of that, they fit the footprint of the SWAC. Get somebody to possibly bring in with Tennessee State that'll play a little SWAC competition, let them get a little taste of the bands and all the other stuff. Everybody see where I'm going with this?
Yes, sir.
Just throwing it out there for conversation. Dr. McClellan, do what you do with it.
What about? I'm surprised you didn't think about Houston Baptist And Houston Baptist has been putting up some impressive wins, and offensively they put up some impressive numbers over the last couple of years. Texas Southern against Houston Baptist, and I'm not sure if Houston Baptist is in a conference or if they're independent, but that might be an interesting matchup. What's that, Mo?
I think Houston Baptist is in the Southland.
Okay.
Yeah. And I went with Tarleton State because they are independent. They would have the easiest transition into the SWAC conference. They don't have to pay anybody's exit fees and everything like that. And for them, if they're looking at money, well, we know SWAC teams travel. And you got two teams right there in your backyard with
Baptist is Southland.
Yeah, with Texas Southern and Prairie View A&M right there in your backyard. Southern is not that far away down the road, so you got three teams with their good travel distance for that program as they get their footing going.
And you're talking about Tarleton State?
Yes.
So okay, Stevensville Tech. I take that must be close to the Dallas Fort Worth area, right?
Yeah, it's slightly southwest of Fort Worth.
Okay, so theoretically, once you get to 20 and then you hit 20, I mean, Grambling can't be that far away either then.
And it's really an easy ride for basically everybody in the SWAC. Jackson State is on I-20. Alabama A&M and
I-20 just State connects how have I never been on I-20? I feel like it connects to everything in the SWAC.
It really does. It's either I-20 or I-10.
Basically.
Okay. Look, AD, you brought up all these, but you talked very few MEAC games. This is a great weekend with 6 SWAC teams. I feel like the whole reason the SWAC put this out and gave these 6 premier SWAC teams these open dates is to say, hey, MEAC, look at these open dates. When you do your schedule, I mean, come on now, Bethune, FAMU. I mean, both of these teams should be looking at playing one of these teams here. A&T. When's the last? We haven't seen A&T play too many SWAC teams, except in the Celebration Bowl.
Yeah.
South Carolina State, Norfolk State. I mean, there's opportunities here. I don't know. Maybe there might be concerns because of the travel, but
I'm going to be honest.
I think it's a great weekend for MEAC SWAC teams to play each other.
I agree with you, Brian.
Given some of the financial limitations, I don't see South Carolina State traveling that far because of the financial limitations that they've had with
how far is it to Alabama State or Alabama A&M? I mean, is it that far?
But South Carolina State has had some other struggles with their finances, try to get things correctly. I don't, as if I remember correctly, I don't think they're even fully funding all of their the scholarships right now. So that's why I say South Carolina State, without them being able to make money off of classics and football games and the check game, may not have the resources. FAMU, Bethune, they go figure it out. A&T go figure it out.
Yep.
Central is going to do pretty good. The only other, obviously, you've got the DMV schools. All of them, if they want to hop on a plane, could come to the SWAC. But that's going to require them hopping on a plane, which you don't know.
I don't see that happening.
If you want to hop on a commercial plane right now, because that would be the only way that those DMV schools could really get down to play those SWAC schools. That's why I didn't even consider that northern portion of the MEAC.
Yeah, Brian, just to give you an idea, Orangeburg, South Carolina, from Huntsville, Alabama, is 6 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay.
Possible.
That's possible.
That's doable.
Yeah, that's doable.
It's a bus ride.
But so look, let's move off of this week 6 Mo. Is there anything else you wanted to add about that open date?
I also was going to look at that and kind of just going off of what AD Drew had said. Basically, yeah, if the possibility of a MEAC SWAC crossover would be of interest, then all of a sudden, maybe why don't you could possibly look at, if you don't get Southern Jackson State as a non-conference, what about Southern FAMU, since you were supposed to have that game this past year? But of course, due to COVID and everything else, you know, introduce, quote unquote, introduce FAMU to the SWAC in that essence, and then find a SWAC team that can play Bethune as well, and kind of just give fans the idea of saying like, hey, later on this year, when they take on these teams, this will actually be for more than just bragging rights. It'll be for like conference affiliation and conference recognition and whatnot. So I think those opportunities could come through, but I totally understand what Drew was saying basically about like the travel stuff, because unfortunately with these non-conference games, you're really talking about either cash strap situations, or you're talking about people just coming out of pocket for a situation that they're not used to as well. Because remember, I'm gonna go ahead and just say this. And this is just me. By the spring, I still don't think you're gonna be at full stadiums. I'm hoping you could even be at 50% capacity for stadiums. But I mean, even with that, like while that'll probably be good money for that max of the half, it's still not great money as you're used to seeing, you know, when it's like a full sellout standing room only type crowd. So that's something that'll definitely be going through the minds of several athletic directors across both the MEAC and the SWAC, and of course, the front offices of both of those conferences too.
Yeah, and also, you know, we've always said this. You pretty much want to keep everything within the 7 to 8 hour bus ride right now, because anything over that 8 hours is, you have to consider getting on a plane, and we don't know how safe planes would be. Which once again goes to why I didn't even consider any of the MEAC North teams for crossover potential.
Good point. All right, guys, moving here to week number 7. April 10th, Grambling and UAPB are the two schools that have the open dates with a game with a non-SWAC scheduled game. Mo, I'll go to you first shot. What game are you looking at? I got a feeling I know, but what's your shot there in week 7?
All right, so of course, you know, locally I'll look at the Alabama A&M Jackson State game. Just because I remember last year, Alabama State scored like 3 touchdowns in a 5-minute span to come back and beat Jackson State. But I will say this, one that really kind of intrigues me in general is actually Mississippi Valley and Alabama State.
Okay.
Yeah, and I say that only because, like, I know that Mississippi Valley, you know, they've been kind of down on their luck in certain matchups, but in some matchups against Alabama State during the past 5 years or so, they've actually played them really tight. If I'm not mistaken, if it wasn't last year, it was the year before.
It was 2 years ago when they took them to overtime.
Classic, right?
Yes.
That game went into overtime.
I remember that game.
And Mississippi Valley had opportunities to beat Alabama State, and unfortunately, they just couldn't get the leg of the turkey to go their way on that situation. But yeah, they've actually had some closely contested games with the Hornets. So I actually think that game could be one that a lot of people are probably going to overlook just because of historically. But at the same time, I think that contest could actually be some close to where people will be like, man, like, okay, like that was a pretty good game. Maybe I should have checked that one out.
Yeah. All right, AD, what about you? What do you got for week number 7?
Well, Bo just took my game, my Mississippi Valley, Alabama State game.
Get out of here, really?
I remember that game from 2 years ago. I remember sitting in the living room, and we had just ate, and we popped on the game, and it was like in the fourth quarter, and we were like, wow, this is actually a real game, because you expected Alabama State. Matter of fact, if I remember right, Alabama State went up big early. Mm-hmm. Mississippi Valley made the comeback, sent the game to overtime, and then Alabama State ultimately won the game in overtime. So it was just one of those things. So I just remember that matchup, and with this being the first time Mississippi Valley is returning to Montgomery with some good memories, the close but no cigar game, as they would like to call it. That was my intriguing matchup for that particular week.
All right. Mo mentioned the Alabama A&M at Jackson State game. It's tough because you've also got Southern at Prairie View A&M, and both of those games were good games last year. I think for all intents and purposes, though, you had Alabama A&M, which beat Jackson 48-43 last year. There were 5 lead changes as you mentioned, A&M trailed 43-34 with about 450 something to go in the fourth quarter. Aquil Glass, another late fourth quarter magic. I mean, whatever you want to call it, 2 touchdown drives, game-winning touchdown with 25 seconds. He threw for like 410 yards, 4 touchdowns. Alabama A&M scored 28 points in the fourth quarter. It was one of those. I think Mo, wasn't that a game you guys called? You called that game.
Almost lost my voice.
Yes, I remember clicking over. I remember watching a little bit of that, and I remember your highlight package at the end, and I was just like, mouth on the floor, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, definitely almost lost my voice because that fourth quarter was back and forth here and there. You really did not know who was literally going to take it, especially in that last 5 minutes. And then Jackson State actually had a chance to win it because they did a flicker play that looked pretty good on the last play of the game. They got about 30 yards down the field before they just ran out of real estate. So it literally came down to the end. But that was a lot of Alabama State games last year as well. But that was definitely one of them. Coolest thing, though, is that the guy who caught the game-winning touchdown pass, he was like a backup's backup. And it was just one of those situations where he just needed somebody on the field. Kill Glass, found him wide open, streaking across the middle, touchdown. I think they said he had played like in 14 total plays the entire season until that point.
Awesome. Third-string guy coming through with the big play. Yeah, and I also think it's an interesting quarterback matchup. I think Jackson State will potentially have an interesting quarterback battle between the young Mr. Jalen, I think, Jones, and Derek Ponder. And I think a lot of people probably, and this is where I feel like, I wish I had Charles Bishop to tell us the 411 that on this one.
Yeah, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, because I got a feeling Tiger Nation, they may like Derek Ponder, but they have got to be excited for what Jalen Jones could potentially mean and do. And so you got that matchup. I think it'd be a great quarterback matchup in that game. And so that was my game. And so, like I said, the other game, of course, is the Southern at Prairie View game. Southern has won the last 4 meetings, 6 of the last 7 against Prairie View. They beat them 34-28 last year. So, all right, and then we get into week 8.
Some people I know who are Southern alums in the Houston area, they call Prairie View's new stadium A.W. Mumford West.
Wow.
Wow.
Southern has had a lot of success against Prairie View in that stadium.
Yeah. It's funny when you go back and when you start looking at history, there are some interesting SWAC matchups, which it's like right now, it's almost been like over the course of the decade, there's been some streaks, where teams have won 6 of 7, 8 of 9. I mean, hell, 24 of 25. I mean, there's some ridiculous streaks. It's not like, hey, we beat you one year, then we turn around and beat you the next year, and it flip flop. No, it's like they're runs. It's like, hey, we won 5 in a row, then we lost, and then we won another 4 in a row. It's
right.
real
Brian, we know about being on the wrong end of streaks as FAMU alone.
Well, they're bad. Yeah, the past decade's been pretty rough. The past 20 years, 15 years have been kind of tough. But
you can't say Bethune around us right now.
Oh, Jesus. You had to bring that up. See, I was doing well until you brought that up. All right, week 8, we already kind of talked about it a little bit, but just to reset, that is the final week of the quote-unquote regular season SWAC schedule. You have not only the Magic City Classic, Alabama A&M, Alabama State. You have the Bayou Classic. Presumably, Magic City will be in Birmingham. Presumably, the Bayou will be in New Orleans, Southern Grambling. Jackson State at Alcorn, who knows, could be a matchup for the East. It was last year. Last year, the East Division was determined at the end of the year between Jackson State and Alcorn. Alcorn, of course, won, and they've won 6 years in a row, I think is the streak. You've got Prairie View A&M at UAPB. Remember, if you listen to preseason and you follow Phil Steele, the 2 programs with the most players on his first, second, third team all SWAC Prairie View, and Arkansas Pine Bluff, each
Right.
with 13, the most of any team. So that's an interesting matchup. Mississippi Valley at Texas Southern. You're just,
Kind of the leftover game. Let's be real.
yeah, but I mean, look, those two teams looking to try to get out of the cellar of the last couple years. So, what didn't we talk about? Or I know we started talking about Week 8. What didn't we get to about Week 8 that you guys are interested about?
I got one.
What you got?
Alabama State, Alabama A&M. Last year, these two teams put up over 80 points in a monsoon.
Yes.
Can we get some decent weather this year? That's all I'm at. I have personally been to Magic City Classic in rain, cold, 100-degree weather. How
April 17th. You've never been to one in the spring, though.
Exactly, because I have been. The only thing I have not been to a Magic City Classic in is snow. So
Okay.
I really want to see what the weather will be on April 17th. And will we get a good matchup based upon the weather? Because for those two teams to do what they did in that monsoon last year was amazing. That's all I got. That's all I got to say.
That was an amazing game. Amazing game.
They probably would have put up 100 points if it would have been about a 70-degree day last year.
I dispute the end. I felt like there was a pass interference, but anyway, that's just my personal opinion.
Yes. All right.
Bro,
That's my intrigue. Go ahead, Bo. Give us your.
I was gonna say I'm sure some Hornet fans agree with Bryan about that last play, but hey, we don't get paid
what's
to
done
make
is
those
done.
calls.
Yeah.
We don't get paid to make those calls. Well, of course, we talked about Week 8 early, and here's the thing. It is a great week for some great matchups. You have two of the biggest classics within the actual conference being played on the same day, but one representing the West, one representing the East. I'm going to look at this standpoint. I know we kind of touched on it before we actually got on the call. I could foresee this situation being like the stretched out TV day to where, I'm going to go and just say that just because traditionally the last couple of years, Grambling State Southern has been an evening game. So probably like a 5 o'clock kickoff most likely. So that'll probably be your evening game. I could see the Magic City Classic maybe being bumped up, possibly maybe an hour, maybe to about 1:30, 2 o'clock-ish now or whatever. So, so maybe like, you're looking at like a fantastic finish with that before you roll into like what the Bayou Classic could be. And then Jackson State, Alcorn State, either that could be like the late
That's
evening
the nightcap. That's got to be your nightcap game.
That could be the nightcap or whatever. Or, and then I guess, either the Prairie View Pine Bluff game or the Mississippi Valley game would kind of be like the IE 11 o'clock SEC network type game in essence. But yeah, I could see them staggering that day out for kickoffs just so you have scenarios that actually interest all sorts of SWAC fans, especially if you have division titles still on the line. Because you can be in a situation where, all right, the winner of Alabama State, Alabama A&M, could be going to the SWAC championship, or Alcorn State needs one of the teams to lose, and they're rooting for the other team. Like, you could have that scenario. Prairie View could be in the same scenario, looking outside if either Grambling or Southern, they need to lose the Bayou Classic. You could have that situation. So I actually do like the idea that Week 8 really, really has your heavy hitter type matchups, but also it gives you opportunity to just see great matchups across the board as you quote unquote wrap up the regular season.
All right, Mr. Sports Director.
What's up?
Taking your idea, and now I'm going to put it on steroids. Let's throw the MEAC into your TV picture.
Okay.
Obviously, we've got the Florida Classic that could be potentially played that same weekend. You've got A&T and Central that could be played potentially that same weekend. And then you've got a couple of games in the North: Delaware State, Howard, Morgan, Norfolk, some combination of those 4 games. You're the program director. And one of the 4-letter networks. Which games do you show which time slots, given those potential MEAC matchups and those potential SWAC matchups?
And
All
let
right.
me jump in real quick because I found something interesting, Mo, about when you were suggesting your time slots. I thought that was interesting because you were bringing up times that I'm always used to the traditional either noon, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and I'm talking Eastern. So obviously,
Okay.
I'm thinking like the noon, 1 o'clock, the 4 window, and then the 7, 8. So your times that you gave earlier were a little bit different. So I want to hear you talk about those times as it relates to this.
Okay. So for Bayou Classic, usually it's 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. For
Okay.
that, traditionally, the Magic City Classic is a 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 kickoff. So if you wanted to possibly like get your best bang for your buck to have a fan look at both, maybe you slide the Magic City Classic up maybe an hour or two possibly to where you're at the 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central time stanza. And another thing you got to think about this is that I'm going off of the idea that we're still having like the original contract. So Bayou Classic still being on NBC Sports Network, and then the other SWAC games most likely ESPN family of the networks or the U or the ESPN3. So yeah, I'm definitely still considering that. Going off of what AD said, I think what FAMU Bethune is using what the ESPN Classic.
It's usually on the U.
Okay, it is on. Okay, I know for
Yeah.
some years it had been on Classic, so I couldn't remember.
Yeah,
off the top of my head.
for some reason they won't put it on an HD channel. I have no idea what that's all about. But anyway, go ahead, Mo. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, I just couldn't remember. I just know like most times it's about turn on the ESPN app, Bethune, Florida A&M, click, and I just go with it. So I just never ever knew that. So I figured that that game probably could possibly still be a mid-afternoon as well, because of course I know how big that is to not only the conference but also to FAMU and Bethune-Cookman graduates and fans and alums and everybody else that supports that one. So yeah, you could probably look at that one as a mid-afternoon. And if I'm not mistaken, I remember North Carolina A&T and North Carolina Central usually being like an early matchup too, as well, maybe like an early afternoon.
Yeah, early afternoon. They would use that game would seem to be finished before the end of the Florida Classic. So
Gotcha.
They probably started sometime around 3 o'clock maybe.
Gotcha. So maybe you slide that up maybe a little earlier, maybe put it closer to noon as a possibility or whatever. But of course, the big thing is that I don't know if we're going to have a revamped schedule as far as what we're going to look at football-wise. I know a lot of people have asked Dr. Charles McCullough that. I'm just curious to see, like, okay, I know in the months of, March and April, usually ESPN, the main thing they're showing is, like, the women's NCAA basketball tournament and select NCAA college baseball games with key matchups, and then the NBA playoffs in the latter part of April. So I don't know if that'll be a prime opportunity to get, HBCU football on some of the other bigger ESPN networks or whatever. I mean, we know for sure they'll definitely be on the digital platforms. I think it's just a matter of, can you get some of the marquee matchups to it? But man, how great would it be if you're able to have that data where you're looking at ESPN2 for some of the bigger games, and then ESPN3, and then like, there's a way to kind of spread it out if it's done correctly from what I've seen historically. But of course, I don't kind of own those situations. So, a lot of these plans.
Do you think any of these games will be moved to Thursday or Friday nights? Since in the springtime, you could use a Friday night to play some of these games, because I know the tradition you avoid Friday night because of high school football. And then of course Thursday night is always a big college football night.
AD, I like the idea of that. The only reason that's going to halt that is going to be what the NCAA protocol is for COVID testing. Like yesterday, when I was at University of North Alabama, they said that, of course, they're going to test their players every week on either a Wednesday or a Thursday. Most likely it's going to be a Wednesday because they want to make sure that they do it 72 hours prior to the games. So moving those games means you have to move your testing, and I just don't know, like, what the financial ramifications are of moving those testing situations. Like, are they always set to get those things on those specific dates at specific times? or whatnot. Now, if they're able to do that, then yeah, I could easily see them moving, for programming, especially if Dr. McClellan can show ESPN, hey, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this, especially with the fact that, your stands won't be packed due to COVID-19 pandemic, and just people just being smart and just saying, I'm not going to take that risk as well. So I could easily see that. Heck, you might be able to get some Sunday games. Who knows? I mean, there's nothing holding you back from playing on a Sunday. There's no NFL. We don't know what the heck The Rock is going to do with the XFL. So yeah, there's a possibility for other dates besides Saturdays.
Let me ask this. Do you think the Magic City Classic, you mentioned that they usually start, what time did you say, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central?
3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central.
Okay, so that actually, so if that's the case, I would probably keep that game there. You know what? I would then probably play the Prairie View A&M UAPB game. I'd play that at noon.
Okay.
And let that be your opening game to
Like
sort of kick off the day. Obviously, that'd be 11 o'clock Central. Obviously, that's sort of unfortunate, but it is what it is. Hey, it's all about television, right, Mo?
It is.
Put enough commas in the check, they're going to move it.
Right. And so what you do then in the midday, that 3:30 slot Eastern, you've got the Magic City Classic. If the MEAC were to jump in there, or the Florida Classic were to jump in there, that'd be on another network, midday, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, something like that. But then you also have on another network, 2 hours later, you've got the Bayou Classic starting. So you sort of creating a gap where one game ends, then you got people transitioning to another game. Obviously, you don't want people leaving your ESPN, but anyway, you want them watching your sport. And then, of course, like I said, the nightcap, Jackson State Alcorn, start that at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And then, like I said, man, you've got almost not quite 12 hours, but you probably got a 10-hour day of 4 good SWAC games appearing on two networks, and I think it'd be a great day.
And one thing you're forgetting, Brian, is HBCU football, unfortunately, is famous for tape delay. So we could have a game coming on either 9 o'clock or even as late as midnight.
Yeah,
from one of the games early in the day, because we have seen some of our classics.
I can't remember seeing that lately. I don't think I've seen that over the last couple of years, though.
Yeah, it happened with the Magic City Classic last year because whatever the game on ESPNU was running over or whatever. And of course, you think about how long the Magic City Classic was. But the key thing now is that majority of people, they have smart TVs, or they have the Amazon Fire Stick, or they have this type of thing to where they're able to get the ESPN app. So if you have the ESPN app, you're able to basically, pull it up digitally for the live stanza as well. I mean, it's not the custom if it's on cable or on regular network TV, but like that is something that, the world is definitely moving towards as well. Brian, here's another thing I thought about too. And of course, this is something I just won't know until it actually happens. If the Magic City Classic doesn't have the tailgating aspect like it usually does, then I could easily see that game being moved up a couple of hours because of that as well.
I thought about that too.
Because usually they have the parade early in the morning, then everybody does tailgating, then you have the actual game. But if you don't have the tailgating aspect
or the parade,
yeah, there's a possibility. Yeah, right. They could not have a parade. There's a good possibility. I mean, ask my friends down in New Orleans what happens when you have parades during the pandemic. You get all these high numbers. So it's true. I mean, the mayor down there, she did say that had she had more information or whatever, she would have probably canceled Mardi Gras. So, the spread of COVID would have not been as bad down there in my favorite city in the world. So, if you have a situation where either the parade or the tailgate or both of them actually get sliced out or whatever, I could see the game actually moving up maybe an hour or two, especially if you're able to work the TV mandate as well. But no, you're totally right, man. 10 hours of HBCU football, possibly on, 2U and 3, it definitely can work out. Because you got to remember this too. The SWAC was the first one to make these spring plans. I'm pretty sure ESPN is going to remember that and then be like, hey, they stuck with it. They always had a plan, so we're not going to let anybody else kind of intertwine or intertangle into this or whatever. It always goes back to this. Dr. McClellan is a businessman, so he will find a way to make a good business deal with all this. But
and Dr. McClellan, we'll take whatever is left over at the BCSN.
gotcha.
Just so you know.
Absolutely. I guess this is one of those times I wish that that our good friend Dr. Kenyatta Cavill was here, that he could add the whole what financial ramifications actually add to it, and all the other great big words that he would probably do that too. But,
all those EDS words he be using.
Exactly. But hey, man's got a doctorate, so
Yes.
kudos to him on that. But I think they can find a way to spread it out if it's done correctly or whatever. But of course, we'll just wait and see. I expect them to actually do some dates, but then have those asterisks saying subject to change as well.
All right, let's wrap it up on this, gentlemen. So I got one final thought here, and maybe it's probably a yes, no. One, yes, no, do you think the SWAC and even the MEAC should look to try to play in the FCS playoffs when it comes around? Obviously, we don't know the date yet, but we know it'll be in the spring. I've heard it may be in the May timeframe. Or should they be looking at, spring celebration bowl? So that's question one. Question two, who do you see has the toughest conference schedule? And then my third question, no one can hold us to this because this will be said in 2020 and it will change it all in 2021.
Right.
But what's your SWAC championship game? All right. All right. So you guys got all that. So I will let Mo as our guest go first, and then Drew, I'll come to you, and then I'll close it.
Okay. When I first saw the idea of the SWAC possibly taking part in the FCS playoffs, my initial thought was I think it actually would be cool to actually see it. But then I started to sit back a little bit, and I thought about all the different things. It's a different scenario, yes, because of COVID-19, but I feel like for the FCS playoffs in spring 2021, in order for the SWAC to actually participate, they've got to find a way to change some rules. And when I say change rules, I'm talking about like the money that's needed just for the bids and the money that's taken away. This is a bad time financially, not only for HBCUs, but also for all college athletic programs across the board, no matter if you're FBS, FCS, D1, D2, D3. Like, this is a bad situation. So the NCAA has got to find a way to have a heart or whatever to like kind of cut back on certain things. If they're able to do that, then yeah, I don't see a problem with a SWAC team participating in the FCS playoffs if it makes sense. You talk about the dollars, it's got to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, then definitely no. I would say no. We cannot allow a SWAC team to go there, especially if the playoffs like go through like the end of May and talking in June, and then you're talking about turning around and playing another football season in three like months. Like, that's just not healthy in any way, shape, or form. If I was a parent, there's no way in the world I would find a way to let my child, try to like play through that and whatnot. So, so unless the NCAA revamps what their situation is for the playoffs, I would not see that. So I would say let's just let them play the SWAC championship and call it a day. If you have the Celebration Bowl, play that too, and then call it a day after that. I do know that Mr. Grant, he's kind of been on the fence about it. So I'm sure he probably sees the glass half empty, half full, because I'm sure putting together a bowl game in such a short amount of time and then playing another one, 6 months, 7 months later, I know that can't be an easy thing for a guy in that.
But 5 months if you talk about the MEAC SWAC Challenge that he's also in charge of.
That is true. I didn't even think about that one. So yeah, man, it's a lot will be on the line for him. So yeah, I would give it a no or whatever, just because it's just not a good situation overall. But of course, this is a unique scenario. As far as a SWAC championship, I'm gonna go out on the line here and say I don't want to sound like this is some favoritism type stuff or whatever, but I really think the winner of that week 1 matchup between Alcorn State and Alabama A&M will win the East. I really, really think that's going to be a scenario. And this is not because Southern University is my alma mater. It's more so what Southern's got bringing back. Or what I think Southern will be able to find a way to win the Western Division championship. And, depending on where it's going to be at, I actually don't know. So I think the winner of that week 1 between Alcorn and A&M against Southern will be the SWAC champion. And to answer your last question, the team with the toughest schedule, it's got to be Alabama State. I mean, this stuff is ridiculous. Southern and Alcorn in your first 2 weeks. This state, then a trip to Arkansas Pine Bluff with all those preseason players that they've got. I mean, I know last year they used a 2-quarterback system, and they had wide receivers that were like legit. I think like their average wide receiver size was about 6'1", 6'2", about 190 across the board. So yeah, like those first couple of games out the box is just ridiculous. Then, Mississippi Valley, that game's going to be tight for them. And then, taking on Alabama A&M in a highly contested Match City Classic, that's always a game full of emotion. So the Hornets definitely have the toughest schedule out of anybody in the SWAC. SWAC didn't do him any favors, so I'm sure Donald Hill-Ely is probably finding all kinds of ways to motivate his team the best way he could.
Well said. Well said. All right, AD, who do you got, or what's your 3 takes?
All right, give me those questions again one by one. I'm the oldest person on this thing probably. So.
All right, MEAC, it had to do with hell, I forgot now. I know it had to do with should the SWAC look to get into the playoffs?
Okay, let's start there.
The playoffs as well as or the Celebration Bowl. Should that happen?
Look, I'm gonna break it down for you. If ESPN writes a check, play the Celebration Bowl. Real simple. They make more. The 2 conferences make more money with those cross division matchups with the Celebration Bowl, the MEAC SWAC Challenge, than it would benefit them than if they went to the playoffs. Yeah, the prestige for the playoffs is good, but we got to pay the bills. We got to pay for all these COVID tests that we got to do. Let's take the money right now. Yep. That's as simple as it gets. Now that may cause for, if they go to the playoffs, they would probably have to move both of their championship games up a week, which obviously is probably why they had that bye in there. The only caveat I have to say about the Celebration Bowl is you can't play the Celebration Bowl Mother's Day weekend for 2 reasons. A, it's Mother's Day weekend. B, that's usually the traditional graduation date for most HBCUs is usually during that weekend. So you have to.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think about that. Good points there.
So you have to play that the weekend of May 15th, Celebration Bowl. So just something to keep in mind with that.
All right.
Question number 2.
Had to do with toughest schedule.
And I'm not going to take Alabama State. We've already broken Alabama State down because by far they probably do have the toughest schedule. So I'm probably going to go with number 2 on the list, which is probably Grambling State. I mean, they got a gauntlet to start off with. Prairie View, Jackson. Kind of got maybe a soft game against UAPB, but given all those field steel players that UAPB has on first, second, and third team, you can't count that as a surefire W either. Alabama A&M, Texas Southern should be improved. Southern to end the season in the Bayou Classic. There's no telling what's going to happen in the Bayou Classic. So, Grambling State has no cakewalk either outside of Alabama State. And my team to
SWAC championship game.
East Side A&M, West Side A&M Southern. I'm going A&M Southern in the championship game. Interesting matchup, but Quail Glass has been getting crapped on for so long in this conference from every bid. If he plays this season, I think he's going to be a man on a mission. And I'm going to throw one thing out there that you did not ask, Brian. If there is a Celebration Bowl, A&M will play Florida A&M in the Battle of the A&Ms, and we'll see if FAMU can become the first school to win the Celebration Bowl for both conferences.
Wow.
All
In
right, well,
2020, I can do that.
I thought, look, I've already seen Rattler Nation talking about winning 2 conferences in 1 year. So, I mean, that's where Rattler Nation is right now.
But
Trying
first, we
finish
got to
off-
beat Bethune. We got to beat Bethune first.
Well, you know, if you could go ahead, Mo. Go ahead.
I was gonna say this. I didn't give y'all a Celebration Bowl pick or whatever, but if you want to sell some tickets for the Celebration Bowl, this after Southern versus Florida A&M, the real ticket seller, Alabama A&M versus North Carolina A&T. Connell Maynard takes on his alma mater
Wow.
that a lot of people still feel that he should have been the head coach a couple of years ago. You know, when he made his way to the MEAC. A lot of people say that he should have been the A&T head coach at some point in time. So if you want to sell some tickets, I say that one's going to put some fans in the seats. You know, besides Southern Florida A&M, that one will definitely put some fans in the seats. Because I mean, think about how many people from North Carolina just going to come down just to see that.
Yeah.
I need my press credentials now for that game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
look,
the mess. I would love to see the noise talking that Coach Manning would actually have to talk about his alma mater, because like he fears nobody. So I would love to see how that situation plays out. And to take matters up another stanza, his daughter is actually a undergrad at North Carolina A&T. So imagine, you know, her probably having like a house divided type shirt too.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. AD, the whole scenario that you brought up about graduations and Mother's Day, it's got me scratching my head now, and probably that's why, like Mo, you mentioned about John Grant being a little apprehensive, is looking at the calendar and saying, I don't know how this is going to work. I guess the first thing is, these championship games would have to move off of May 1st and move up to April 24th.
Right.
Then if you gave yourself an off week on May 1, then you're talking May 8.
Which is Mother's Day weekend. So
I
if they
thought
do
Mother's Day
celebration,
would be the next weekend.
no, it's second weekend. So
second weekend.
if you do a celebration bowl, you keep,
it'd have to be,
keep
you
the
have to have a
championship
bye
games
week.
in.
Yeah,
You
okay.
keep championship games as they are. If you go to the playoffs, you need to move the championship games up a week.
Yeah, but the playoffs. See, that's the thing. The FCS playoffs aren't going to move. They're going to be what they are. I'm of the thought that I think this 1 year, this unique year, you know, COVID and the spring football, if you have a chance to, let's just say if somebody can have now the problem with the playoff, as I'm talking about this, is one, because the SWAC doesn't have an automatic bid. I don't even think the MEAC has an automatic bid. You're talking about being an at-large. So that would mean you would have to be playing, you'd have to get votes. And right now I just looked at the stat FCS from the fall. The only 2 HBCUs that were in the top 25, you had A&T at 20, FAMU at 24. Alcorn State was receiving votes. So we're going to have a conversation with Craig Haley coming up probably in the next few days, going into next week. I'm interested to know, how are voters going to view teams in conference-only matchups? You know, I mean, if you can't play an out of conference, I think sometimes the SWAC gets dinged because they're not beating anybody out of conference. Sadly, I mean, they're not beating any of the other. I mean, other than when A&M beat North Alabama, who else has? When's the last time the SWAC or a SWAC team beat a non-HBCU FCS? Right. So that's a problem.
Except for North Carolina A&T.
Except for North Carolina, right? I'm just talking about the SWAC. And that's the problem with the SWAC getting ranked.
I know Prairie View beat, was it Stephen F. Austin a couple of years ago?
Okay, probably when
I think that's been at least 3 years ago. It's at least 3 years.
Definitely at least 3.
So I mean, we're talking. It's been a while. I mean, hell, McNeese State might as well be a SWAC member as many times as they've beaten SWAC teams.
Right.
You know, so that's an interesting phase. So I originally was all for playing in the FCS, but as you brought up, good points, guys. I think the Celebration Bowl would make the most sense because you could have that off week on Mother's Day weekend, then come back and possibly play May 15th. And if you do it in Atlanta, who knows, by May, we might be at 50%. Who knows, capacity, whatever it is, that's a big stadium. You
open the roof.
Yeah, let it breathe, open the roof. I mean, all kinds of possibilities. So that's my hope. My championship game, I told you I'm only going to be held to this in 2020. It's Grambling, Alabama A&M. It may completely change in 2021 as the next 6 months. I have time to analyze these schedules and find out who's coming back and who's not and all that fun stuff. And I mean, my two teams with the toughest schedules, Alabama State and I think it was Jackson State we talked about. I mean, by far and away, I actually wrote down Alabama State with the toughest schedule. I just think the first 4 games are like, ugh. And then you got to come off and end it with Alabama A&M. So, yeah, that's I hate to use the word, that's a job killer, but man, that's the kind of schedule that I hope the Alabama State athletic department does not hold anybody responsible for what happens in the spring of 2021, because it is not a true reflection of the program. Everybody's working through COVID. So, all right, guys. Look, man, Mo, you've been gracious with your time. Thanks for hanging in there with us, man. This has been a great time. I hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and again, Mo, you can follow him on Twitter at Mo Carter, WZDX, WZDX in Huntsville, Alabama. Always dropping some great highlight packages and some good stuff. I mean, lots of info that he shared. And so make sure to follow Mo on Twitter.
Great Twitter follow, bro.
Great Twitter follow, no doubt.
Great job on Twitter. I'm able to keep up with some things that that slipped past me because of just following your Twitter feed, man.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right, general sports talk. I know we're talking HBCU, but it's always cool because Mo covers all sports. So just as a sports fan, Mo's a great follow, folks. Drew, find him at BCSN Drew on Twitter. You can find me at DRB365. Don't forget, subscribe. But we're now running not only our video shows, but we're running podcasts, audio podcasts. We're on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Radio Public, some other places I don't even really go to, but I know we've got them. So anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. Just search BCSN Sports Wrap, subscribe, give us some ratings. I know it all adds up to something. We're still trying to figure it out.
Or you could go straight to our app and do it straight through our own app.
Yeah, my BCSN on you can search on either Apple or Google is where you can find the app, and then of course at my BCSN1 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And so that's all the plugs I got, and it is time to go. You guys be safe. Make sure to mask up. For Mo Carter, A.D. Drew, I'm Bryan Fulford. Thanks for watching and listening to the Sports Wrap, and you guys be safe out there, and we'll talk to you again soon. Peace out.
Right.
But you stay hard.